Cadet Lee Jun slumped in his seat at the very back of the massive briefing hall, watching 300 alien cadets hang on every word their instructor said. The Galactic Naval Academy's main lecture hall could hold 1,000 beings, but today it felt cramped with tension. Commander Vextal, a towering blue-skinned Altarian with forearms and mandibles that clicked like metal scissors, paced the stage with military precision. Protocol 7 exists for one reason, the commander's voice echoed through the hall. Never engage unknown entities without full fleet authorization. This single rule has prevented 17 galactic wars and saved trillions of lives. Jun rolled his eyes and glanced around at his fellow cadets. The tall, stick-thin Kithans sat perfectly straight, their compound eyes reflecting the holographic displays. Next to them, the crystalline Nexari hummed in harmonic agreement, their translucent bodies pulsing with soft blue light. Even the furry, bear-like Ursok cadets maintained perfect attention, their massive claws folded respectfully. Only the 12 human cadets in the entire academy seemed restless. Park Min, a sharp-eyed girl from New Seoul Colony, caught Jun's attention from 3 rows ahead. She made a subtle throat-cutting gesture and pointed toward the exit. Jun had to bite his lip to keep from laughing. The average authorization process takes 72 hours, Commander Vextal continued, his forearms gesturing at holographic battle scenarios. This allows proper risk assessment, resource allocation, and diplomatic consultation. Patience saves lives. A Kithan cadet raised one of his 6 arms. Commander, what about emergency situations where 72 hours might be too long? Excellent question, Cadet Zektar. Emergency protocols reduce authorization time to 48 hours minimum. Any faster response has historically led to catastrophic results. Jun's hand shot up before he could stop himself. The entire hall turned to stare at him, and he felt his face burn red. Commander Vextal's mandibles clicked ominously. Yes, Cadet Lee. Do you have something to contribute to our discussion? Standing slowly, Jun felt 300 pairs of alien eyes boring into him. Sir, what about the Void Wraith incident? Didn't we follow proper protocols then? The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Commander Vextal's blue skin darkened to an angry purple. Since you brought it up, Cadet Lee, perhaps you'd like to explain to your classmates why humanity's first contact with the Void Wraiths resulted in the complete destruction of 3 colony ships and 40,000 civilian deaths. Jun's throat went dry, but he pressed on. Because we waited for authorization, sir. The colonies sent distress signals for 6 days while the Galactic Council debated response options. By the time the fleet arrived, there was nothing left but debris. Shocked whispers rippled through the alien cadets like wind through grass. A Nexari in the front row actually chimed in discord, her crystalline form flickering between colors. Even the Ursok cadets, normally impossible to ruffle, shuffled, their massive paws nervously. Exactly, Commander Vextal's voice boomed. Human recklessness and impatience cost 40,000 lives. If the initial contact team had followed proper first contact protocols, instead of charging in with weapons blazing, those colonies might still exist today. But sir, Park Min stood up, her voice steady despite the hostile stares. The Void Wraiths were already attacking. The colonists were dying while we filled out paperwork. The colonists died because humans assumed hostile intent without proper evaluation, the commander snapped. The Void Wraiths might have been attempting communication. We'll never know because human trigger-happy responses turned a potential first contact into a genocide. Joan felt anger building in his chest like steam in a pressure cooker. So we should have let them destroy the colonies while we tried to shake hands? You should have waited for proper backup and diplomatic support. Commander Vextal turned to address the entire hall. This is why other species view humans as dangerous. Your species acts first and thinks later. Emotions over logic. Violence over patience. An uncomfortable silence settled over the briefing hall. Jun remained standing, feeling like he was on trial. Around him, alien cadets whispered among themselves in languages that sounded like everything from bird songs to grinding metal. Humans have been part of the galactic community for only 50 years, Commander Vextal continued, his voice softer but no less cutting. Other species have maintained peace for thousands of years using these protocols. Perhaps it's time humans learned. That their way isn't always the right way. Park Min's jaw clenched visibly. Two other human cadets, Kim Hae and Yu Bin, looked ready to start a fight right there in the lecture hall. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. That's when the emergency klaxons began wailing. The piercing alarm cut through the briefing hall like a laser through steel. Red warning lights bathed everything in an ominous glow as automated voices announced in 12 different languages. Priority alert. All senior staff to command center. Priority alert. Commander Vextal's four arms moved in practiced motions, activating his personal communicator. The device crackled with urgent chatter from the command deck. His mandibles clicked rapidly as he listened, his blue skin shifting through several shades of concern. "Class dismissed," he announced abruptly. "All cadets return to quarters immediately." But as 300 beings filed toward the exits, June caught fragments of the communication chatter. Words like Kepler sector, research station, and complete communications blackout drifted through the air. Something was happening out there among the stars, something that might require more than 72 hours of careful deliberation to handle. The first day after the emergency alert, June tried to focus on his regular classes, but his mind kept wandering to whatever was happening in the Kepler sector. During advanced starship navigation, he caught himself staring out the viewport at the distant stars, wondering which one might be Kepler. Professor Tess, an elderly Nexari whose crystalline body had turned cloudy with age, noticed his distraction. "Cadet, Lee, perhaps you'd like to calculate the hyperspace jump coordinates to the Vega system instead of daydreaming." June snapped back to attention, mumbling an apology as he bent over his calculation pad. But even as he worked through the complex math, part of his brain was thinking about emergency response times and how long it would take a rescue fleet to reach Kepler. By the second day, the entire academy was buzzing with rumors. Some cadets whispered that pirates had attacked the research station. Others claimed it was a natural disaster, maybe a solar flare or asteroid impact. The Kithern cadets, with their compound eyes that could see into infrared, insisted they'd spotted unusual energy signatures coming from the direction of Kepler during their astronomy practicals, but it was the human cadets who seemed most affected. During lunch in the massive dining hall, they clustered together at their usual table, speaking in hushed tones while alien students gave them curious looks. "My cousin works communications," Kim Hae said, pushing his food around his plate. "He says the distress signal is still broadcasting, but it's getting weaker every hour." "What kind of research were they doing out there?" asked Yu Bin, a stocky girl from the Mars colonies. Park Min set down her drink with more force than necessary. "Does it matter? They're in trouble, and we're sitting here eating synthetic protein while the brass argues about paperwork." June watched, her pace back and forth in their shared dormitory that evening. The academy dormitories were designed to house mixed species, with adjustable atmospheric controls and varying gravity sections. The human quarters were in the standard Earth normal zone, but even here, June could hear the clicking conversations of Kithern cadets through the walls and the harmonic humming of Nexari students practicing their meditation cycles. 12 hours to assemble a task force," Park Min muttered, her boots tapping against the metal floor. "Then another 6 hours to brief them. Then they want to send a probe first, which adds another day. By the time they actually do something, whatever happened at Kepler will be ancient history." Through their small viewport, the stars looked cold and distant. Somewhere out there, people were in trouble, and the galaxy's greatest military academy was following procedure. On the third day, June managed to hack into the academy's communication systems during his computer programming class. It wasn't particularly difficult. Human cybersecurity techniques were apparently still novel enough that the alien design systems had trouble detecting them. What he found made his blood run cold. The distress beacon from Kepler Station was indeed getting weaker, but that wasn't the worst part. The automated emergency message was becoming more fragmented, more desperate. June listened to the latest transmission through his earpiece, trying to keep his expression neutral as Professor Kelvan droned on about quantum encryption algorithms. The voice from Kepler was human, probably one of the researchers. It was hard to make out individual words through the static, but phrases like containment breach and their learning came through clearly. Most disturbing was the background noise, a sound like metal grinding against metal, punctuated by what might have been screaming. That night, June couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about his conversation with Commander Vextal, about 40,000 colonists who died while bureaucrats debated. He thought about the Academy's golden rule and whether following procedures was worth letting people die. The fourth day changed everything. June was in the Academy's main communication center, officially helping to update the long-range sensor. Arrays but actually monitoring the Kepler transmissions when the signal changed completely. Instead of the usual distress call, something else came through, a warning that made every human in the room go pale. The voice was different now, mechanical and distorted, as if it was being transmitted through damaged equipment. But the words were clear enough. Warning to all vessels, do not approach Kepler station. We have awakened something that was meant to stay sleeping. The ancient ship, it's not dead. It's been waiting. They multiply faster than we can contain them. Oh gods, they're everywhere now. Then came a sound that would haunt June's nightmares. The screech of tearing metal mixed with something that might have been organic screaming. The transmission cut to static. Park Min grabbed June's arm so hard it left bruises. We have to do something. The Academy brass is already mobilizing, June said, but even as he spoke he knew it wasn't enough. The emergency protocols called for a 48-hour minimum response time. Whatever was happening at Kepler station didn't sound like it could wait 48 minutes, let alone 48 hours. That evening, June made his decision. The Academy's training hangar was massive, designed to accommodate everything from single-seat fighters to heavy cargo transports. Most of the advanced vessels were locked down tight, but the training ships used for navigation exercises had minimal security. After all, who would steal a ship that couldn't jump more than a few light years? Training vessel. Harmony was perfect for June's needs. Small, fast, and equipped with a basic hyperspace drive. He'd flown similar ships dozens of times during his courses. Getting past the night security wasn't particularly challenging either. The Academy's guards were used to dealing with homesick alien cadets trying to sneak off station, not with determined humans planning grand theft starship. The Harmony's engines hummed to life, with a sound like distant thunder. June ran through the pre-flight checklist with hands that barely trembled, his training taking over despite the magnitude of what he was doing. Stealing a military vessel was a court-martial offense at minimum. If people died because of his unauthorized mission, he could face life imprisonment or worse. But as he engaged the hyperspace drive and felt the familiar stomach-dropping sensation of jumping between stars, June thought about the voices from Kepler station. Someone had awakened something ancient and dangerous, something that multiplied and consumed. The galaxy's military leaders would debate and plan and follow proper procedures, while whatever was happening at Kepler spread beyond control. The jump to Kepler took 6 hours. 6 hours alone in hyperspace, with nothing but his thoughts and the steady hum of the Harmony's systems. June tried not to think about what he'd find when he arrived. He tried not to think about court-martial or the disappointment in his parents' eyes when they learned their son had thrown away his military career. He tried not to think about the possibility that he was already too late. When the Harmony dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system, June's heart sank. Kepler station hung in the void like a broken toy, its running lights flickering erratically. Debris floated around it in lazy orbits, pieces of hull plating, twisted metal beams, and things that might once have been equipment or furniture. But the station was still there, and that had to count for something. Docking was an automated process. The Harmony's computer systems interfacing with what remained of Kepler station's traffic control. As the airlock sealed and pressurized, June checked his sidearm and emergency supplies. Whatever he found inside, he was going to face it alone. The silence that greeted him as he stepped aboard Kepler station was absolute and terrifying. The station's research logs were scattered across dozens of data terminals, but June managed to piece together the horrifying story while the AI's holographic form flickered beside him. Dr. Yang So-Ra, the station's lead xenoarchaeologist, had been so excited in her final entries. Her team had discovered something incredible, a derelict ship that predated every known galactic civilization by millions of years. "Look at this," June muttered, scrolling through video logs on the main terminal. The screen showed Dr. Yang's face, her eyes bright with scientific curiosity as she stood before a massive, dark vessel that seemed to absorb light itself. "We've found the holy grail of archaeology. This ship is older than the Nexari crystal cities, older than the Kythan hive worlds. It might even predate the extinct harvesters." The AI's crackling voice interrupted his reading. "The research team activated the ship's power systems 4 days ago. They believed it was dead, just another relic to be studied and catalogued." June's hands trembled as he pulled up the next entry. Dr. Yang looked tired now, worried. Behind her, research equipment sparked and fizzled. "Something's wrong. The ship's not responding to our scans anymore. It's like it's thinking. The power readings are increasing exponentially, and we're detecting movement in the lower sections." "Movement," June whispered. The final log entry made his blood freeze. Dr. Yang's face was streaked with tears and blood. Alarms blared in the background, and through the laboratory windows, he could see metallic shapes swarming through space. "They're not machines," she gasped into the camera. "They're alive. Metal and flesh combined like nothing we've ever seen. They came pouring out of the ship's hull like insects from a disturbed nest. They consume everything, our equipment. The station's hull even," her voice broke. "Even our people. They're learning from what they eat, getting smarter, more organized." The screen went black. "Devourers," the AI said, its holographic form stabilizing slightly. That's what Dr. Yang called them in her final transmission. Each creature is roughly the size of a fighter craft, but they can merge together to form larger entities. They reproduce by consuming matter and energy, then splitting into multiple copies. Through the station's main viewport, June could see the ancient derelict ship floating in the distance. It was enormous, easily 10 times the size of Kepler Station, with a hull that seemed to shift and writhe in the starlight. Metallic creatures swarmed around it like angry wasps, their numbers growing even as he watched. "How many are there now?" he asked. "Current estimate, 47,000 individual units," the AI replied. "They're increasing by approximately 12% every hour. At this rate, they'll reach critical mass in 14 hours. Critical mass? The point where their numbers become too large for any known military force to contain. They'll spread to nearby systems, consuming entire worlds to fuel their reproduction. Within 50 years, they could devour every inhabited planet in the galaxy." June stared at the swarming creatures, trying to process the magnitude of what he was seeing. Each devourer moved with purpose, their metallic bodies gleaming as they harvested material from the derelict ship's hull. Some were small and agile, darting between larger structures like mechanical fish. Others had grown massive by consuming their smaller cousins, their bodies bristling with weapons that seemed to be crafted from the very metal they'd eaten. "The galactic fleet won't arrive for 36 hours, the AI continued. "Even if they could destroy the current swarm, evacuation protocols would require them to clear 17 inhabited systems first. By then, the devourers will have spread beyond any hope of containment." June's mind raced. 36 hours was too long. Hell, 14 hours was too long. He needed to act now, while the swarm was still concentrated around the derelict ship. But what could one person do against 47,000 alien killing machines? His eyes fell on the station's technical specifications, displayed on a side monitor. Kepler Station was powered by a military-grade fusion reactor, the same type used in heavy battle cruisers. The reactor was designed to power the station's research, equipment, and maintain life support for up to 500 personnel. But if he could overload it, redirect all that energy into a single massive explosion. AI, what's the maximum energy output of this station's fusion reactor? Standard operational output is 47 terawatts. However, if safety protocols were disabled and the magnetic containment fields were collapsed simultaneously, the AI paused, its hologram flickering. Theoretical maximum output would be equivalent to a 60-megaton nuclear device. Enough to destroy the derelict ship? At close range, yes. However, the explosion would also completely obliterate this station and everything within a 50-kilometer radius. June nodded slowly. What about my survival chances? Calculating survival probability, 0.003%. For some reason that made June laugh. Not a bitter laugh, but genuine amusement at the cosmic joke of it all. Here, he was one human cadet against an ancient alien swarm that could devour the galaxy, and an AI was helpfully informing him that he was definitely going to die. "For you don't know much about humans, do you?" he said, already moving toward the reactor control panels. "I have extensive files on human behavior and psychology," the AI replied, sounding almost offended. "Yeah, but you don't really get us." June's fingers flew over the control interfaces, bypassing safety locks and rerouting power conduits. "See, other species look at impossible odds and calculate the logical response. Humans look at impossible odds and ask, how do we make this work anyway?" The work was surprisingly complex. Kepler Station's reactor wasn't designed to explode, quite the opposite. Every system had multiple safeguards to prevent exactly what June was trying to accomplish. He had to disable 17 different safety protocols, reroute the main power grid, and reconfigure the magnetic containment fields to collapse in a specific sequence. His hands moved steadily despite the sweat that soaked through his academy uniform. Through the station's viewports, he could see more devourers emerging from the ancient derelict every minute. Some had begun to explore the outer edges of the debris field, testing the remains of destroyed research equipment with curious, probing appendages. "Fascinating," the AI observed. "Your stress hormones indicate extreme fear, yet your motor functions remain completely steady. This contradicts my understanding of human psychology under life-threatening conditions." "Fear's just another piece of data," June replied, splicing power cables with practiced efficiency. "The question is what you do with it. Some people freeze up, others use it to focus." 8 hours into the work, June's back ached and his eyes burned from staring at technical displays, but the reactor modification was nearly complete. Through the viewports, the devourer swarm had grown visibly larger. Some of the creatures had begun to merge together, forming massive composite entities that bristled with harvested technology. "I need you to transmit all of Dr. Yang's research. Data to every military frequency in the galaxy," June told the AI as he sealed the final power coupling. "Make sure they know how these things reproduce, how they think, how to kill them." "Transmission commenced," the AI replied. "However, I should point out that your plan has a critical flaw. This station's maneuvering thrusters are designed for minor orbital adjustments, not for ramming an object the size of the derelict ship." June wiped sweat from his forehead and grinned. "Who said anything about ramming? We're not going to hit the ship, we're going to get close enough that when this reactor goes up, it takes the whole derelict with it." He activated the station's thruster control system, feeling Kepler Station shudder as its engines fired for the first time in months. The massive research facility began to move, slowly at first, then with increasing speed, as June diverted more power to the propulsion systems. The devourers noticed immediately. Hundreds of the creatures broke away from the derelict ship, swarming toward Kepler Station like a metallic cloud of death. Some were small and fast, darting through space with insectile grace. Others were massive composite beings that moved with predatory intelligence, their bodies crackling with energy weapons harvested from the station's own defensive systems. "Incoming hostiles," the AI announced unnecessarily. The first wave of devourers struck the station's hull with impacts that shook the entire structure. June could hear metal tearing and atmosphere venting as the creatures began to consume the station's outer sections. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut automatically, sealing off the compromised areas, but he knew it was only a matter of time before they broke through. Through the command center's reinforced windows, he could see individual devourers crawling across the hull like metallic spiders, their bodies shifting and adapting as they fed on the station's superstructure. One creature had grown massive by consuming an entire section of the communications array, its body now bristling with makeshift weapons and sensor equipment. 30 seconds to optimal detonation range, the AI reported. June's finger hovered over the reactor's manual override switch, a simple red button that would collapse the magnetic containment fields and turn Kepler Station into the largest bomb in human history. In the last moments before he pressed it, he thought about Park Min pacing their dormitory room, about Commander Vextal's lectures on following proper procedures, about the 40,000 colonists who died while bureaucrats debated. He thought about what it meant to be human in a galaxy full of rules and regulations and careful logical decision-making. Sometimes being human meant making the choice that no sane person would make, the choice that defied every probability calculation and statistical analysis. Sometimes being human meant lighting a fire that would consume everything, including yourself, just to make sure the darkness didn't win. The moment June pressed the red button, time seemed to slow down. Through the command center's reinforced windows, he watched the devourers swarming across Kepler Station's hull suddenly stop their feeding frenzy. For a split second, every metallic creature turned toward the station's core, as if they could sense what was about to happen. Then the fusion reactor collapsed. The explosion didn't start with light or sound. It began as a wave of pure energy that tore through reality itself, converting matter into plasma in microseconds. The station's hull vaporized instantly, taking the attacking devourers with it. The shockwave expanded outward, like an invisible fist, reaching the ancient derelict ship in less than a heartbeat. What happened next lit up the entire Kepler system like a newborn star. The derelict ship, that ancient vessel older than galactic civilization, simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a massive dark shape crawling with thousands of devourers. The next moment there was only expanding plasma and scattered atoms. The explosion was so bright that automated cameras on nearby planets had to shut down to avoid permanent damage. But explosions in space don't behave like explosions in atmosphere. Without air to carry the shockwave, the energy had nowhere to go but outward in all directions. It slammed into Kepler's sun with the force of 1,000 nuclear weapons, disrupting magnetic fields that had been stable for millions of years. June never saw the full scope of what he'd unleashed. In the final seconds before the reactor collapse, the station's AI had activated every emergency protocol at once. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut around the command center. Automated systems fired the Harmony's escape pod from its docking bay, launching it away from the station at maximum acceleration. The explosion caught the tiny pod anyway. June's last conscious memory was of being thrown against the pod's bulkhead as the shockwave hit. Then everything went white, then black, then nothing at all. The rescue fleet arrived 36 hours later to find a debris field where Kepler Station used to be. Admiral Song Hai of the Terran Defense Force stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Soul's Pride, staring at the sensor readings with a mixture of awe and horror. "Ma'am," her communications officer called out, "we're picking up a faint life. Sign from one of the escape pods." "Impossible," Admiral Song replied, but even as she spoke, she was moving toward the rescue bay. Nothing could have survived that explosion. The escape pod was barely recognizable. Its hull was scarred and melted, its systems running on emergency power that should have failed hours ago. When the rescue team cracked it open, they found June unconscious but alive, his body kept stable by medical systems that had somehow continued functioning despite catastrophic damage. He was clutching a data pad against his chest like a lifeline. 4. 3 days June drifted in and out of consciousness in the fleet's medical bay. When he was awake, he mumbled about devourers and ancient ships and something about the galaxy being in danger. When he was unconscious, the medical monitors showed brain activity that suggested intense nightmares. Admiral Song visited him every day, reading through the data he'd recovered from Kepler Station. What she found there changed everything. "You magnificent, reckless fool," she whispered, during one of his lucid moments, her voice mixing admiration with exasperation. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" The data from Dr. Yang's research revealed the horrifying truth about the devourers. They weren't just one isolated swarm that had awakened by accident. They were part of a galaxy-wide network, seeded throughout space by an extinct race called the Harvesters. The ancient aliens had planted these dormant swarms on thousands of worlds, designed to activate simultaneously when certain conditions were met. The awakening of the Kepler swarm had been the trigger. The Harvesters were thorough, Admiral Song explained to June as he gradually recovered. They hid their weapon systems on dead worlds, in asteroid fields, even inside gas giant atmospheres. The plan was perfect: wait for galactic civilization to develop, then activate every swarm at once. Total consumption of all organic life within 50 years. But June's desperate attack had disrupted their timeline. His transmission of Kepler Station's research data had given the galaxy's military forces the information they needed to locate and identify devourer sites before they could fully awaken. The emergency response had been swift and coordinated, with every major species contributing ships and resources. 17 systems evacuated so far, Admiral Song continued, scrolling through reports on her tablet. The Nexari found 3 dormant swarms in their outer colonies. The Kithans discovered a massive nest in the Vega sector. Even the isolationist Ursok opened their borders to joint military operations. The numbers were staggering, 430 billion lives saved, because one human cadet had ignored orders and stolen a training ship. Entire planets evacuated in a matter of hours, as military fleets hunted down ancient alien weapons that had been waiting for millions of years. But June's victory had come with a terrible price. The explosion that destroyed the Kepler swarm had destabilized the system's star. Massive solar flares erupted from the sun's surface, sending waves of deadly radiation toward 3 inhabited worlds. The planets, New Kyoto, Harmony Ridge, and the mining colony of Prosperity had less than 4 days before the radiation reached lethal levels. The largest evacuation in galactic history was already underway. Through the medical bay's viewport, June could see the fleet of ships assembling for the rescue operation, massive Nexari crystal ships that could carry thousands of refugees in their hollow cores. Kethan hive vessels with modular compartments designed to house different species. Even ancient Ursok generation ships, pulled out of mothballs and pressed into service. The irony isn't lost on anyone, Admiral Song said, following his gaze. The same alien species who spent decades teaching humans to follow proper procedures are now coordinating the biggest emergency response in galactic history. All because one human decided the rules didn't matter. June watched a Nexari evacuation ship dock with the fleet's command vessel. Its crystalline hull pulsed with colors that indicated stress and urgency, emotions that the normally calm Nexari rarely displayed. Through the docking bay's transparent aluminum windows, he could see refugees streaming aboard, humans mostly, from the threatened worlds but also the scattered alien populations who had made their homes in the Kepler system. The solar flares will peak in 2 days, Admiral Song continued. We've got over 800 ships working around. The clock to evacuate 3 entire worlds. The Galactic Council has suspended all normal operations to coordinate the effort. A communication alert chimed from Admiral Song's tablet. She glanced at it and smiled grimly. Commander Vextal sends his regards, by the way. He's currently leading an evacuation fleet to Harmony Ridge. Apparently he's been telling everyone who'll listen that human recklessness might actually be useful in emergency situations. Despite everything, the pain, the exhaustion, the weight of what he'd done, June found himself laughing. The sound was weak and raspy, but genuine. He's probably right, June managed to say. Sometimes recklessness is exactly what the galaxy needs. Outside the viewport, more evacuation ships arrived every hour. The organized chaos of the rescue operation was beautiful in its own way. Hundreds of different species working together, with a precision that would have been impossible under normal circumstances. Emergency protocols that usually took days to implement were being executed in hours. The galaxy had learned something important from one human cadet's desperate gambit. Sometimes following the rules meant letting people die. Sometimes survival required breaking everything, including the rules themselves. But as June watched the evacuation fleet grow larger, he couldn't help wondering what other ancient weapons might be hidden among the stars, waiting for the right moment to awaken. The Harvesters had been thorough in their preparations for galactic genocide. How many other sleeping dangers were scattered across the galaxy, dormant but not dead? The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it filled him with a strange sense of determination. The galaxy had rules and procedures for handling threats, but it also had humans. And humans, as Admiral Song had pointed out, were magnificently reckless when it mattered most. The morning of his tribunal hearing, June woke up in cold sweat for the 6th time that week. His small quarters aboard the Academy station felt more like a prison cell than student housing. For 6 months he'd been confined here while investigators picked apart every detail of what happened at Kepler Station. Court-martial proceedings, they called it. Everyone knew what that usually meant for military personnel who stole ships and disobeyed direct orders. Park Min had visited him almost every day during those months, bringing news from the outside galaxy and updates on their former classmates. She'd graduated at the top of their class, earning the highest honors ever awarded to a human cadet. But instead of accepting prestigious assignments with the Galactic Fleet's elite units, she'd done something that shocked everyone. She'd requested to serve under whatever command June received, assuming he wasn't executed or imprisoned for life. "You're insane," June had told her during one of their conversations. "You could have any assignment in the galaxy. Why would you want to serve with a disgraced cadet who might spend the rest of his life breaking rocks on a prison asteroid?" Park Min had smiled that determined smile he remembered from their academy days. "Because someone needs to keep you from blowing up any more star systems." Now, as June put on his dress uniform for what might be the last time, he tried not to think about the possible outcomes. Execution was unlikely. Humans were still too rare and valuable in the galactic military. Life imprisonment was more probable. Complete dishonor and discharge from service was almost certain. The tribunal chamber was the largest room in the academy, designed to accommodate delegates from hundreds of different species. As June entered through the main doors, escorted by 2 Kithon guards, he expected to see a handful of judges and maybe some academy officials. Instead, he found himself facing something that took his breath away. The chamber was packed. Every seat, every viewing gallery, every available space was filled with beings from across the galaxy. He could see the tall, elegant forms of Nexari, delegates. Their crystalline bodies pulsing with colors he'd learned meant respect and gratitude. Massive Ursoc representatives sat in specially reinforced chairs, their bear-like faces unusually solemn. Even species he'd only read about in textbooks were present: the floating jellyfish-like Etherians, the rock-skinned granite lords from the outer rim, tiny insectoid buzzers who communicated through complex wing vibrations, 800 and ET. 47 species were represented in that chamber. Every major civilization in the galaxy had sent delegates to witness his trial. As June took his place at the defendant's table, a hush fell over the massive assembly. The ancient Nexari speaker, a being so old her crystalline form had turned nearly opaque with age, rose from the central podium. Her voice, when she spoke, resonated through translation devices in hundreds of different languages. "Cadet Lead June," she began, her crystal body pulsing with deep blue light that indicated profound respect. "You stand before us today accused of theft of military property, disobedience of direct orders, and reckless endangerment of galactic security." June's heart sank. This was it, the formal reading of charges before they announced his punishment. However, the speaker continued, and her crystal form shifted to brilliant gold. "You also stand accused of saving 430 billion lives, preventing the extinction of galactic civilization, and demonstrating courage beyond the comprehension of most rational beings." A murmur ran through the assembled delegates. June looked around in confusion, trying to understand what was happening. "We taught your species our rules because we feared your fire," the speaker said, her voice carrying across the chamber like a song. "We believed that human unpredictability was chaos, that your tendency to act on emotion rather than logic was your greatest weakness. We spent decades trying to teach you patience, procedure, proper protocols." The speaker paused, and every being in the chamber rose to their feet in perfect synchronization. June found himself looking at nearly 1,000 delegates, all standing in silent tribute. We were wrong. The tribunal's verdict was unlike anything in galactic legal history. Not only was June completely exonerated of all charges, but he was promoted to full commander and given command of something that had never existed before, the Rapid Response Division. This new unit would operate outside normal military protocols, with authorization to act immediately in crisis situations that were too urgent for standard procedures. "The galaxy needs rules to maintain order and prevent conflicts," explained Admiral Song, who had been appointed as June's superior officer. But we've learned that sometimes survival requires individuals willing to break those rules when the stakes are ultimate. The Rapid Response Division will be our insurance policy against threats too dangerous to handle through normal channels. The new division's headquarters was established on a mobile space station that could jump to any location in the galaxy within hours. The facility was enormous, equipped with the most advanced technology from dozens of different species. Nexari, quantum computers worked alongside Kithan hive mind networks and Ursoc engineering systems. The fusion of different technologies created capabilities that no single species could achieve alone. But it was the personnel roster that truly amazed June. When he called for volunteers for his new unit, he expected maybe a few dozen applicants, mostly humans who shared his tendency toward reckless heroics. Instead, he received over 10,000 applications from across the galaxy. Park Min was the first to arrive, wearing the insignia of his second-in-command and grinning like she'd won the galactic lottery. "Remember when I said I was still learning? About humans?" she asked as she saluted him in the division's new command center. "Turns out other species want to learn too." She was right. The volunteers included some of the galaxy's most elite military personnel, Kython pilots who had tired of endless committee meetings before combat missions, Nexari tactical specialists who had grown frustrated with the slow pace of traditional military decision-making, even Ursoc engineers who admired the human approach of build it fast and fix it later. Commander Li Jun's first briefing to his assembled team took place in the division's main hangar, surrounded by ships from dozens of different species. Fast attack craft sat next to heavy cruisers. Stealth reconnaissance vessels were parked beside massive troop transports. It was the most diverse military force ever assembled, united by a single principle: when lives were at stake, action mattered. More than procedure. "The galaxy has rules to protect civilization from chaos," June told his team, looking out at faces that ranged from human to utterly alien. Most of the time, those rules work. They prevent wars, maintain peace, and keep billions of beings safe. A young Kithan pilot raised one of his 6 arms. "But not always, Commander," June smiled. "But not always. Sometimes protecting others means being willing to burn everything. The rules ourselves, even the stars if necessary. That's what humans bring to this galaxy. That's why we burn brightest when everything else goes dark." The assembled officers, human, Kithan, Nexari, Ursoc, and dozens of other species, stood at attention as June activated the division's operational status. Somewhere out among the stars, ancient threats still slumbered. The Harvesters had been thorough in their preparations for galactic genocide, and the Devourer swarms were just the beginning. But the galaxy was ready now. The Academy's golden rule still existed, and most of the time it would continue to prevent conflicts and maintain order. However, it now had an exception written into galactic law. When the stakes were extinction, when time was running out, when following procedure meant watching civilizations die, the Rapid Response Division would act. Looking out through the command center's massive viewport at the stars beyond, June thought about the sleeping dangers that might be hidden among those distant suns. Whatever ancient weapons or dormant threats were waiting in the dark, they would face something the Harvesters had never encountered, a galaxy willing to break its own rules to survive. The Academy had taught him that patience and procedure could prevent wars. The Kepler incident had taught him that sometimes war was already here, and the only choice was how to fight it. His new division represented a balance between those two truths, the wisdom of following rules when possible, and the courage to abandon them when necessary. Park Min joined him at the viewport, her reflection visible in the transparent aluminum beside his own. "So what's our first mission, Commander?" June pulled up a star chart showing 17 different systems where unusual energy readings had been detected. Each one might be another Harvester site, another ancient weapon waiting to wake up and devour entire worlds. "We go hunting," he said simply. "The galaxy has had enough surprises. Time to find the threats before they find us." The Rapid Response Division's ships powered up their engines, ready to jump to whichever system showed the first signs of ancient danger stirring, because sometimes the rules needed to burn so that everything else could survive, and humans, as the galaxy had finally learned, were very good at lighting fires when the darkness threatened to win. The end.